Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Valerie Hope, and you have tuned in to Time to Come Alive. This conversation is always an opportunity for us to become more conscious as individuals, to become more connected with others, and then also create something of value in the world. And hopefully that thing that you create is something that brings you joy and peace, like a Christmas song. Anyhow, I wanted to also take this opportunity to let you know if you're tuning in live, please share this with your own group, your family, your friends, your colleagues. It's an opportunity for you to have some conscious conversation, right? Something to talk about at your lunch break or perhaps on the weekend. And also, if you're watching this in a recording, feel free to post this on your timeline or your social media feed for others to watch later. Thank you so much for joining us live today. There's no exception. Every single time I have the opportunity to invite someone to share this time with me, I'm so excited because the conversations that we have are usually, they're unplanned, I should say. They're highly unregulated conversations. I don't send out a list of questions. I have an opportunity to really be present with the person that's here. And speaking of being present, just to help us get into the moment and really connect with what we're going to talk about today, before I introduce my very special guest, just want you to, wherever you are, whether you're sitting or standing, just to find yourself an opportunity to just get centered and grounded. You are tuning in, or you've decided to listen to this because there's a reason, right? There's something or someone that encouraged you to do so. And because our topic today is going to be dealing about creating teams that could eventually or essentially become family, I want you to think about a group that you currently connect to. Now, it could be a group at work, it might be a community group that you connect with, perhaps there's family. I want you to think of a group of people that you connect with. Everybody have a group in mind? All right, good. Now, I want you to think about what is it that you love about being a member or part of that group. Could be as a leader, it could be as a participant, whatever role you have in the group. What is something that you enjoy? Just to yourself, think about, a couple of the highlights of being a part of the group. And then in your mind, I also want you to appreciate that. Give it or allow the space for gratitude in having those positive experiences, or that the payoff of belonging to a group like that. And now also think, because there's two sides to everything, consider what might be missing in that group. What do you think missing for you? Perhaps is missing for the individuals that also participate in the group. Perhaps is missing in what you contribute to your company, to your world, to your team, to your family. What do you feel is missing? Just take a moment. Now, as you think about those things, I want you to imagine in this conversation, listen for what might make a difference for the teams or the groups that you're involved in. Perhaps there are areas you want to continue to highlight and express a gratitude because the team doesn't know, or that group doesn't know how much you appreciate that quality. And there might be things that you feel are missing that could enhance their contribution. And perhaps this conversation will give you some insight that would allow that. All right. Just take another couple deep breaths. And now refocus ourselves to welcome our guest to Time to Come Alive today. Now, this person, a very special individual, Tim Shaffer. He and I met, I think, Tim, it was like 2005 or 6 perhaps. And Tim at the time came to do a workshop in the hotel that I was working in. And because I love to connect with people, I think I asked you, hey, can we meet up or have a phone call or have lunch? I can't remember exactly the context. And little did I know at the time that when I met you, Tim, that 3 years later, I believe 3 or 4 years later, I would be working for you on your team at the corporate office for Hyatt. And I got to tell you, one of the things and one of the reasons I brought you or invited you to be a part of this program is because I've noticed over time in my life that I've had a blessed career path, and every single job or every single company and organization that I've worked for has had a leader that not only helped me come alive, that gave me an opportunity to hone and enhance and grow my strengths, but also that they were alive themselves, enlivened by what they did. And so I like to call this my Best Bosses series because I've had at least 3 of you who are going to be on this program. We already had one, Jonathan Chaplow, a few months ago, then you, Tim, and then next week I'll talk a little bit about who my special guest there will be. But thank you so much for being here today. I know that I appreciate you so much and the opportunity to sharpen and get to do some of my best work. And I'll say even more that this particular time in my life as an entrepreneur, as a leadership coach and a speaker, has really been, I would say, I don't know what percentage, let's call it 80% of what I do and know. And the reason I want to do what I'm doing is because of some of the opportunities and the platform that you gave me in my experience with Hyatt and where you kind of directed me and my strengths, which I didn't even know I had, or interest, to be honest. So thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Valerie, and I'm humbled. I feel like we should say, and that's it, folks, right? That was amazing. I truly am humbled by your words, and I love the fact that you said, little did I know at some point I'd work for Tim. The reality is, I think, Valerie, I worked for you, right? I mean, that
it may have seemed that way sometimes.
Swap stories on that, but I'm absolutely honored to be here and to be a part of Time to Come Alive. And, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Valerie, but I love the name of your company, Connect to Joy. It's so incredible. And growing up, my father and I talked about just one-on-one. One of the great memories I have growing up with him was talking about joy. And what is joy, and how do we create more of that in our lives? And so I love that your company name is Connect to Joy. And every morning when I get up and I go to my work desk, if I'm home, working from home, I have a sign over my desk that says, "Today I choose joy." And so I love that connection, not only our time together in our careers, but also just that the idea of helping to inspire others and finding more joy in their lives. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you. To start off, Tim, one of the things that I so appreciated, like I said, about you was this notion that bringing a group of people together, and in this case, it was a virtual team. We had, over the 7 years that you and I worked together, I don't know how many people total, but we constantly had just a group ripe for talent, living in different parts of the country, right? So we met virtually. And I just would love to hear from your perspective, what was it about working with a group that had you tap into how to make people come alive? Like what it was that you wanted to accomplish by bringing this disparate group of people together to achieve something?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what is it that I really like to tap into, right? With teams and working with teams. And maybe I should just come clean and tell you, as selfishly, I love to develop people, and I love when people see their potential. Not only they identify it, and then they're able to work and create a plan and take action on that. I mean, that's, for me to be a part of that, whether it's for individuals and then as a group of individuals, it's such a joy for me. Absolutely.
Where does that come from?
Yeah, I think maybe some of it is maybe God-given, that I think that I have always had a teacher's heart, if you will. And so I love that. And today, in my organization, Arete Coaching Group, working with individuals, leaders through leadership coaching, or working with teams through team effectiveness, I just find such joy out of being able to see other people and those light bulbs go off. You can tell in their body language and facial expressions when they're having those insights, and they're like, oh, right? And then working with them to be able to then employ those insights and make them come alive.
I think what's interesting is so you and I worked at Hyatt for, at least I worked for 7 years at the corporate level, and we transitioned from Hyatt at the same time, right? End of 2018, 2017. Oh boy, it's gonna be almost 2 years. Yikes. So I'm curious. So when you left Hyatt, I know you and Doug Patrick now have a company called Eritate Coaching. You're also a leadership coach and speaker, and just the two of you, imagine, right? In the organization.
That's right. That's right.
So what's it like to work with a team when you were leading us as a team, and what's it like not having a team to lead?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I will tell you, I enjoy leading a team. Yeah. And so the transition has been somewhat, at Hyatt, my focus was helping the team fulfill their purpose individually and as a group. And now it is working with other teams that I may not have a long-standing relationship with, or seeing or speaking with daily or weekly, but it's really about helping other teams and individuals do the same thing. So the type of work is very similar. It's just the audience is different and actually much larger, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I imagine because the continuity, right? You're probably with them for a set period of time. That may have an impact.
Yeah, it does. I mean, we'll have different engagements, different lengths of time. But one of the things at Eritate is we say we go into partnerships for life. So that's a commitment that I make, that Doug makes, we make together. And that's a big responsibility, because if we're not able to commit to that, then we really think about, is this a good partnership? And so we make that commitment going into and starting engagement. So I still, even though I may have had clients last year, I still have people calling me this year and vice versa, just to stay in contact and touch base, which I love.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things, speaking to that about you're connecting obviously with people, period. And when I think back to the years that we spent working together, I think that's one of the things that I found that was a gift. And I'll say this much. I remember when you started, when I became the lead regional director, and you had me take charge of the interview process. We had a spot to fill, and we had to go through several candidates, right? Not only looking at their how they showed up on paper, but then also coordinate interviews with them. And my tendency to hire with my heart and like, oh, this person is great and they'll be so much fun to have and they have the right spirit. You had a whole different set of criteria to look for that you knew would work with the team. And always your opinion and your insight was dead on. So I'm curious, just thinking about building teams, let's just start with that. What was it that you looked for or have looked for to have the right chemistry? Because that's the one thing I'm always so impressed with. You just write down the right people at the right time. What do you look for?
Yeah, I think, I'm going to put my quote unquote HR hat on for a moment, right? And say that I think looking at the specific role and what that role, the purpose of the role and the outcomes expected for that role. Let's start there and not start with the people, but start there. And being clear on those outcomes, expectations in the selection process. And so do people have skills or experience in this area? That was an important part to consider, as always. And then also, I think behavior is important as well. And so I know today we're going to talk about this idea of teaming and others around this virtual concept. And there's so many versions, right, Valerie, of a virtual team. There are people that travel full-time for their jobs, which even though they may have an office to go home to, so to speak, I would consider them virtual because they're road warriors. Or there are people who maybe come into their quote-unquote office, corporate office or home office a couple days a week, but then work from home. And then some people that work from home full-time. And so there are a lot of versions of that for sure. And I think that for me is, and I can only share my experience for sure, but as you said earlier, our group, were always placed in their homes around the country, around the United States, and supporting North America and South America.
Mhm.
And so what behaviors would help somebody be successful being placed away from the hub, so to speak, right? The corporate office. And so I looked at that. One, do they have high self-structure? Well, if they do, that means likely they can stay organized. If they don't, can they demonstrate those behaviors and to get the job done? I think that's important. Are they self-starters? I think that's terminology oftentimes I hear employers throwing around, but it really, in this case with virtual teams, so important that people take initiative. I think that, wow, and I sound like I'm probably rambling right here, but there's so much there to consider. And I think also people that speak the truth, I think that's important and people that are willing to be vulnerable. So if somebody is working from home and they need help, I always wanted someone that would raise the flag and say, I need help, help me. Otherwise, they're likely going to drown, right? They're likely not going to be successful. And then in a team environment, then that doesn't help the team be successful. And so those are some, we could name more, I'm sure, but those are some things that I thought about and looked for and would ask questions around to help determine their experience with those.
And I can see why you chose me.
That's right. That's right.
There are a couple that are a little dubious. I'm like, I don't know about the self-structure, but I did learn a lot of that from you, a lot of the structure that I had to implement. Can you tell us about a time where you had an opportunity to fill a spot on the team and what that was like for you, having to identify not only the criteria you just shared, but also how they would fit in to the rest of the group and what you had the group focused on?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, I would tell you that my experience is that I've done this for years, and I would imagine there are many leaders that do this, and there are others that don't. But I take the perspective, if I'm interviewing someone and looking to fill a role, that I have a responsibility, a strong responsibility to that individual to help them be successful. And so oftentimes I see and hear about interviews where the applicant goes in and tries to sell themselves. And I think it's important for that supervisor to sell themselves just as much, right? And to be wise and make a wise decision. Can I help this person be successful? Because ultimately we're going to partner together to make that happen. And if I can't help someone be successful or help them achieve their goal in their career, then I need to say no to them and tell them that. They may be perfect right now for what I need, but if I'm not the right match for them long term, and I don't know, I'm sure there are plenty of people that think that way, but I oftentimes hear leaders not expressing that. And I think that's an important responsibility for leaders. The other thing I'll mention is kind of the second part of your question about the team and the chemistry and matching that. I think it's important to have team members a part of the interview process and then absolutely part of the onboarding process. Because I think there's no better judge, if you will, of are we going to get along, are we going to work together, than somebody who's already doing the job, if that's available. And that could be a phone interview, it could be a video chat, it could be an in-person conversation. But I think getting that perspective to be a part of the decision-making is really important.
And that was really huge for us, because I think what it showed us, I can only speak for myself, but I know with the rest of the group, we had those moments in the conversations of how valued our opinion was, because you included us in the process. And then also we knew that we would have to really embrace this new person coming in and what they offered. And we could just plug in so much easier if we knew from the outset who they were, what they were like. And then the battery of personality assessments that we engaged in helped tons.
Yeah, and the assessments, I'll say about the assessments, that the assessments we used on our team after we hired, right?
Yes.
And it's not part of the hiring process necessarily. Some people do that, and that's fine. I just always chose not to do that, because sometimes I think assessments, although many measure kind of someone's natural leaning, and how they may respond. It doesn't necessarily measure how they will respond.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd rather look at that from their experience and interactions through the interview process, and we'll get to the assessments, right?
And I want to talk more about how you leverage those, because that's something that's really important. But I want to go back to something you said about speaking the truth, and this might tie into that being vulnerable, at least for me right now. You may or may not remember this, but when I first started working in your team,
I feel like you're about to drop a bomb right now. All right,
no bombs, no bombs. This is a really.
Here it comes, folks. Here it comes.
Do you remember in 2010? There was a time right after I came on board with the team, and I had my 90-day review. And I remember having a conversation with you and Christy at the time. She was remote. She was in Chicago. You live here in Dallas as well. So we met up in person, and we had Christy on speakerphone. And she was, I think, the senior VP of talent. Or
Sounds like a good title.
I
Absolutely.
don't remember. Yeah, something like that. So she was your boss, essentially. And I remember we had this great conversation about, Valerie, what you bring to the team. Thank you so much for this. You highlighted some of the positives. And then you you and Christy both shared a concern, because I had a tendency, and I 100% admit to this, of taking some things that were well established by the team or by the organization as this is what tool or resource and how we're going to employ this tool in the field. Valerie, use this. This is a format. Go and be successful. And then I would tweak certain things because, I'm like, oh no, this could be better. And I'll do kind of my own thing because it reflects my personality. And you called me out on it. And you said, but it was I loved how you said this, because I remember you or Christy, I can't remember who said this, but that Valerie, we noticed that you have a tendency to take information or take resources and, put a spin on it, put your spin. We want you to know that these have all been approved prior to, given to the team by several layers of people. And there's a reason why it's being done the way it's done. And we noticed that that's such a tendency for you that if you don't think that that's going to be the way that if you can't, I can't remember exact terminology, but it was more like, if you don't think that you can commit to using it as they're designed, this may not be the right job for you. And that was like frog in my throat. I'm like, talk about speaking the truth. Do you remember this?
I do. I absolutely do. Yeah, it's
Whew.
Yeah. How are you feeling? So Valerie, have you worked through that?
I did. The reason I bring it up though is because I absolutely respect it. Although I had that frog in my throat where I was just like, whoa, okay. And I said, yes, I can work with this, definitely. And I straightened up, and I've obviously stayed on the team for many more years. I do respect so much knowing at that 90-day period, like this is a make it or break it moment. There was no doubt or question about what the expectation was, how I was not fulfilling a certain aspect of the expectation, and what was needed for me in order to, comply or buy into or whatever, to align to what you guys wanted. And it made it crystal clear. And I remember from that point on, I was just like, Tim, can I do this? No? Okay. All right. But I really appreciated how forthcoming you and Christy were in that conversation, because I don't know if I've heard of leaders who can give that much clarity and people walk away kind of going, I don't know, I'm not really sure what people expect, or maybe they get called out for something and they weren't really clear about what they should do to be, in the future. So I've worked through it, but I'm curious about that notion of speaking the truth. How does that play a part of this very self-structured, self-motivated group?
Yeah, well, thank you for working through that situation. 6 and 8 years later. Anyway, no, it's good. And I think it's a valid question around, and I think it's a real challenge for leaders. And in fact, I'm going to be in Florida working with a client in October specifically around accountability. And that seems to be a topic that keeps coming up. Why aren't my people doing what they need to do? Why aren't people doing more? And I believe that if leaders want to hold their employees accountable, they need to first hold themselves accountable. And what that means for me in this scenario, your example that you shared, your personal example, is that as leaders, we need to be clear on our expectations. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, people are doing their best. You were working hard, you were doing your best, and you were exhibiting what a few of the traits that I most respect about you is your creativity, your innovation, no question about that. And your need for freedom at times, right? And let me do my own thing.
Have you worked through that,
Tim? I'm still working through it, but no, it's good. But I think that having said that is it's how to set expectations, or the importance of setting expectations so that the employees or our peers around us, right? Setting expectations with our peers, setting expectations. I'm going to flip it on its side. Setting expectations with our bosses, what we need from them, and how they can best lead us and manage us as well. In sharing that information so that the person can be successful. Otherwise, they're just doing their best, trying to find their way. And will they hit the mark? I don't know. And so I remember there were a few items that were very specific. So there were consistency as an organization in our messaging. But what I would say is that what you brought to the group, one of the things that you brought to the group, in addition to your amazing leadership as well, and respect of the team, is challenging the status quo. To say, okay, so we're doing it this way. What if we did it another way? Can we test it out and just see? Let's fail fast, right? And so that's something that really, one of the biggest added values that you brought to the team. So I'm throwing the compliment back to you. How's that?
Thank you.
It's true though, absolutely. But I think, to your point, I think leaders, you know how I think about virtual teams is this, and I don't know if this, I'm going to do this symbol, but it looks better from this side. It looks like more like a triangle if you're looking at it. And I'm going to be a little dorky and just ask whoever's listening and watching, just make the triangle symbol with your hands. Yeah, not the heart symbol, but the triangle symbol. And so if you think about the bottom left triangle, and this is my approach and has been my approach with this, Valerie, with teams, especially virtual teams. That bottom left corner represents expectations. And leaders and team members with each other, we need to set expectations around outcomes for the role, for the team, and behaviors. I remember what we did as a team is we created a team charter, agreed upon behaviors that we would interact with each other, and how, if somebody didn't interact in that manner, what we would do as a group, how would we address it? Who would go and talk to that person? Mm-hmm. So to help them be successful within the group. And then also I think with that is communication, the expectations around communication, frequency, how, what. So that's, for me, that was top of mind for me in that kind of bottom left corner of bottom corner of the triangle. The other triangle is boundaries. And so, and when I think about boundaries is kind of what is the level of decision making for the role, and being clear on that. So that, Valerie, you didn't have to call and say, may I or may I not do this? Mm-hmm. Instead, you knew, right, clearly what your decision-making level is. And since some roles that may include spending of money, right, or working with clients or taking on certain customers or clients. But what are those boundaries, not rules, but boundaries? And then the top of the triangle really leading up is, and this was the most difficult, and I think most difficult for virtual teams, is creating an engaging culture. Especially when you have team members that are sitting in different places around a city, a state, country, a continent. That for many leaders is the most challenging. And yet, Valerie, you and I have the experience of making that happen.
Absolutely. So let's talk about that, because I think that's one of the things among many that made this group so special. we maybe saw each other live in person 3, maybe 4 times a year, if we were lucky. And talk to us a little bit about what are the elements that create, first of all, an engaging culture for our team. If you can just recall maybe a few things that you remember or you implemented so that we could create that culture, and what was the impact of that?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to mention several things about creating culture for a virtual team. The first one is, I think there has to be a strong sense of purpose and people understanding what that purpose is for their role specifically and for the team together. I keep doing the triangle. And the value that in delivering on that purpose, the value that it adds to the end user or the customer. I remember one time I had somebody on the team was going to go visit a client in the field. And as you mentioned earlier, we worked for a hotel company. So they were going to go to the hotel and do some work. And I said, so what is the value that you're going to create? In other words, what's the purpose of you going? And the person on the other end of the line said, I don't know. I know what I'm going to go do, but I don't know what value that really adds. Hmm. And I remember saying to that person, well, then cancel your trip. Hmm. I already have it scheduled. Nope. If you cannot see yourself, the value that you add and the fact that this client, this customer needs you to be there and needs your help, then we need to pause and have a conversation around that, and which we did. And so I think that's important, right? That's an important piece of it. Purpose.
Was I the person? I'm like, probably.
It was. So notice I was trying to give you an out there saying there was this person.
No, I'm sure I had plenty of those conversations to come on to. After so many years working together, we had, let's call it out. Let's speak the truth, Tim. We did have plenty of those conversations. You're right, because I do remember, part of the role is to support groups and organizations or in this case, our hotels in a certain way. And there was a certain cadence to it. And I believe that, what you're speaking to is having not only a purpose for our role per se, for whatever the role of that individual on the team is, but also that it's so clear what that role is going to contribute to others. Not only could be articulated by the person, but the recipient. The recipient must be able to articulate, this is why we're going to take X amount of hours away from the business to be trained or to be coached or to be mentored or whatever the conversation or the purpose was. It's absolutely. And yes, that taught me tons. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would think too is that what you just said too about taking away from the business, that oftentimes can be the mindset of the end user, when the reality is we're adding value to the business that's going to help grow and help you and your team be even more productive, right? And have even greater results. So it's that shift, that mindset. And nothing, I think, erodes joy more than people feeling like their efforts aren't adding to the bigger picture, or they don't know how to connect that for themselves and for others. So I think that's an important one for sure, is to be clear on purpose and value for the team. I think also this idea of team charter, I mentioned earlier, was having agreements amongst, when there is a team, it may be just you and one other person, or it could be a group like we had, but having agreements around expectations for each other and how we'll communicate. That helped create a sense of culture and how we would develop that culture as well. I think too is, you mentioned that we met 3, maybe 4 times. I mean, there were probably a few years we met twice a year. And there are maybe companies out there that for financial reasons can't get the groups together physically as often, which totally makes sense. I would say whenever you can is important. And I always live just the minimum 2 times a year. I've got to get this group together as a whole. And so we can spend time together. And then I would personally, which you took over this in the last couple of years, but I would personally then go visit people in their space, on the road, on their trips, about once a quarter to spend just one-on-one time with them, which I think is this idea of creating culture is part of that, and connectivity as well.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll mention two more things. Is that all right? Okay. I think, so one of the things that I don't know if everyone enjoyed as much, but I found that it worked. And when we didn't do it, things didn't work as well. And that was having a standing meeting, video chat meeting every week. So every Monday morning, right? And the poor folks in California, that would be an early call for them, definitely. But Monday morning, standing call, it was a chance to see each other. I see you, can see each other, connect, and not only share progress, not just sharing what people did, what we executed on. That's not always helpful, but really sharing progress people are making and impact. We would share and celebrate people's successes, the other person's success. And then also as an opportunity to ask for help. Say, hey, I have a customer that I'm going to go see, or I've had a phone call that somebody's asked me about this. Does anybody have any experience with this, or what did you do? But to purposely design those conversations in a way that the group became connected and dependent on each other to support each other, I think is the additional piece of creating that culture. That was important. Yeah.
You're right, because the Monday calls were not always the favorite, but not because of the quality of the people or the content. A lot of times it was just the logistics of it, right? Big travel day for many of us, and 70% of our role involved travel. I think that also played a big part in our perception of the value of that call. So what it took, and having it on the Uber or the taxi. Or
do you remember, Valerie, when we stopped the call because the team said maybe we don't need to have calls as frequently, so let's stop it. Maybe we'll do it monthly or quarterly. Or and what did you notice about what happened to the feel and the connectivity of the team?
Yeah, the connection actually started to fade a bit. Yeah, we didn't see each other that often, and we would have conversations one-off, but really a cohesion that really started to disintegrate. Is a big word, but yeah, we started erode. Let's say it became more of an afterthought. So being intentional about those conversations, I think, made a huge difference. And I think as we work together, because one of the things that you did really well is empower all of us to bring our best selves to the team. So we had the opportunity to create the call, or not just the cadence, but also the content and how we expressed ourselves within the call, and structure it in ways that work better for people. So we always had that freedom. You talked about the boundary, right? You gave us that clear boundary. And there are times when you were on the call, and then as I took over the leading of the operation of the team, then, we kind of did some other things too. So very helpful because of my freedom, I did want to bring something up that I think made our team highly engaged and unique in many ways. And this was something that showed up in every iteration of our team. And we had people come in and go out over the 7 years that I was on the team. I would say every couple of years we had some amount of turnover. This notion that when we did connect and we did get together, there always seemed to be very palpable, there's quality of partnership, and you mentioned vulnerability. I don't remember a meeting where all of us were together face to face, but where someone didn't cry, or there were some tears, or there's some moist cheeks. And it just seemed, and at the time, to be honest, I was like, I'm not the most emotive person in the group for sure, but I do remember the poignant moments. We had so many of them on a regular basis. What do you think created the dynamic where people who lived different coasts for most of the year could come together and have a conversation where there were tears? And these are like tears of joy and appreciation, not really frustration or sadness, but speak to that, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was exhausting.
Speak the truth. Yes.
It was. I mean, can I just tell you, there were times, right, certain meetings we had to walk out and we're just like, ugh, right? I'm drained in a good way. I'm drained, right? You have to empty out so you can fill it back up. So it's cathartic. Cathartic?
The catharsis.
Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. And so, which is good. And I think I go back to this selection process as well, right? Well, that was one of the things I talked about is important, right? People that are willing to speak the truth, people that are willing to be vulnerable and say, I don't have it all together and I need help. And I think setting that as an expectation early on is important. Is important. And I think that, and then with purpose to develop it, as long as it adds value to the team and the purpose of the team. I remember one particular, and I will tell you that when I took over this particular team and had the honor to lead it was in 2008. Mm-hmm. And I was told at that time that team members don't last more than 2 years on this team before they get burned out. And so every 2 years I'd be flipping the team or rotating the team. So that I was walking into that going, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So, because it took time to get people up to speed because it was such an important role for the organization. And yet what ended up happening was as we started shifting, being clear on expectations, shifting the behaviors for the positions that were needed, people stayed because they were feeling fulfilled and wanted to stay, right? And because they found, in most cases, I would say, able to do more and more of what they helped them come alive, their best. So I think those are important pieces. And I think for a leader that, and what I knew that my team needed, because you asked me directly, people would ask me directly, Tim, open up even more yourself, right? And I think for leaders, it's important for leaders to start that vulnerability, model that vulnerability. One of the ways to do that is to boldly seek feedback from their team members. Listen, I want to be a better leader for you. What would that look like or sound like coming from me if I were to be a better leader for you? I mean, to be bold enough, vulnerable enough to ask those questions, to model that behavior so that the team members then in turn are open and vulnerable as well. And I think with purpose, the team used that vulnerability to cleanse, connect, and support each other, for sure. And I remember we had one person on the team that was very logic-driven, maybe a couple, but extremely logic-driven. And initially when she was on the team, we started in on these conversations, leader, let's ask, right? Let's ask the questions. Let's go there. We're going to go there, folks. Bring Kleenex. We're going there, right? Just in case. I remember her saying, oh my gosh, really? Really? We're going to do what? And so I remember having a side conversation with her about, so what is the value, right? Let's talk about value. I think, and I don't know how often those conversations occur with leaders. Based on the people I talk to and work with, they don't happen enough. Mm-hmm. And people need to, I would say, suggest that needs to happen more often, for sure. The other thing I'll say, and I'm going to take a breath because I've been talking for a while, I feel like is it's okay to cry. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to say that. There are a lot of people that disagree with me, right? What's the famous movie? There's no crying in baseball, Tom Hanks said. And people say there's no crying in the boardroom. There's no crying in business. And I think the reality is that, at least my perspective experience, is that tears are a physical manifestation, a physical expression of not only emotion, but also it can be stress, it can be anxiety, but it's a physical manifestation of something that's already existing and already there. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important that, I don't think we should all sit around and cry all the time. We may not get the work done we need to get done, right? We're going to feel good about each other, but not get work done. We're in business. Let's get work done. Be productive. That's the purpose, right? But I think to create an environment, leaders, where it's okay to be yourself, And if that's an expression of tears, then let's don't hide that, right? I think that's just me, and I don't need to necessarily talk more on it unless you want me to, but I think that's important as well.
That is important. And I do want to give some context, because the majority of the time that I recall that tears were a part of the conversation or part of the experience were generally because people were moved or touched or inspired by the conversation. I recall often we would have moments, especially when we met together and we were talking about our team and the culture and how engaged we were, that we would intentionally take time to appreciate individuals' contribution and acknowledge who they were for us on the team. And that frequently brought the tears, right? I think the welling of appreciation that was pretty evident for us. It wasn't that we had these meetings where there was gnashing of teeth and tears of frustration, at least not as a group. There were times when, well, obviously there were things that were disappointing or sad, but I think the majority of the time the tears were really of an acknowledged, appreciated, moved, touched soul, if you will. I want to go back to one of the things that you said we would require or ask of you to share more vulnerability. So talk to us about what that was like for you hearing that feedback, and what did it take for you to begin to assimilate it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what was my reaction to hearing feedback when I would ask and assimilate it and take action on it?
Specifically vulnerability.
Yeah. I think, one of the conversations that really stands out to me to this day, Valerie, you and I were having dinner on the road, and it was just the two of us. We were talking, and I can't remember if we were in Phoenix or if we were in San Francisco, but it was one or the other. We were sitting up in a kind of a rooftop restaurant. We'd had a very long day, and we were sitting there talking, having good conversation, and I asked for feedback from you about me, and you said, Tim, what I want is to know you even better. Not the work you, but the you.
Sounds like me.
Yeah, not the yo-yo, but the you, right? And I remember, so my initial reaction, I'm just keeping it right, honest, of course, is my truth is I like to fix things. I like to move very quickly. I make quick judgments, right? And my first thought was, oh my gosh, how much more of me can I give? That was my initial thought. And I don't want to judge that reaction necessarily, because it is what it is, right? And it was at the end of a long day. It's not so much, and so really the point was the next part of that. Okay, now what do I do next, right? And my next thought was, I asked for it, right? Yeah. She shared it. We have so much trust, and the relationship's healthy that she shared it. So, right, I respect and love that, and I can decide what I do with that information. So I remember going to my room that night and taking a good night's sleep, and the next morning waking up and saying, all right, I need to explore how I give more of myself. And so that's when you ask about assimilation, right? I think everybody's different. I think some people, the natural reaction is to defend or say, or in many cases, I'm working with leaders now that never ask the question of their teammates and of their peers. And so they never even ask. And so that connectivity and relationship rarely, if ever, will be deep enough where there's a strong bond that lasts, right? And I think, I truly do believe that people connect in relation based on vulnerability, that trust is built through vulnerability. We hear others speakers say that. I believe that as well. And so our willingness to go there and be vulnerable and share helps build the foundation of trust for that relationship. Yeah. And so no matter what our initial reaction is, it's really what do we do to move forward? And so that's just keeping it real. I tend to go left. And then I've learned I need to take a deep breath And even if the feedback is seemingly positive, I still need to learn something from that.
Mm.
One, it tells me this person, if they're mentioning it, that's what they likely need more of from me. Yeah. So hopefully that answered your question.
It did. Yes, it did. And it brings up others, but the one I'm curious about too is, you talk about creating a space and an experience for the team, right? Creating an engaging culture, boundaries, having expectations, all of those things. I want to know, what were your needs and how were those needs fulfilled through leading, right? Because it's one thing for the leader to create on the behalf or the benefit of the team. But I'm now curious about what you got from the team, or from leading the team, and what you needed and how you fulfilled those needs.
Yeah, I think so. What did I need? My needs in leading a team. Yeah, I would say again, I go back to the teacher at heart, and I would tell you that I really do enjoy supporting people to do their work, and always have, absolutely always have. And so what I needed from others is people just to commit to doing their best. And when they're having a rough day, to say, I'm having a rough day, can we talk about it? And I think that was very fulfilling to me. It helped me come to life when I know I could, and maybe the support I'm giving oftentimes was just to listen. Because can I just say this, that I think I hired pretty well, Valerie, right? And many others that listen, much smarter than I am, and brilliant individuals. And so oftentimes they just needed somebody to listen because they were out on their own, out in the world, so to speak. They weren't in a corporate office. They weren't in a home office, home being a group of people together. And so they just needed someone to know somebody was there and had their back, which included speaking the truth when maybe they were off a bit. And so that was something that I really enjoyed, was being that support for the team and for individuals. And I think virtual teams need that type of support. It's very important for them.
Yeah, but
I know you are.
the question was a little bit more nuanced. So I'm curious about you fulfilling your needs. I get that you were really committed, and that's so evident in everything that you've shared and everything I experienced, committed to fulfilling the needs of the team. But how did Tim get his needs fulfilled?
Yeah, so I would say a few things.
What were your needs, maybe, and how did you fulfill them?
Yeah. So I think need for connection and relationship, right? Which check and check. So that was although I know that's important for high functioning, productive teams, whether they're all working in the same workspace or they're virtual or remote, or we actually called our team mobile, right? A mobile team, because we're always on the go. But that's important. And I needed that just as much because I was a mobile employee as well, right? I was on the go and working. The other thing I would say that I needed to feel challenged and develop along the way. And one of the ways I did that was this relationship between kind of being the bridge between the group that was supporting customers in the field, our team, and the corporate office. So I was technically corporate office, so was the whole team. But when we have decisions being made, and I was part of those, but decisions being made, and then we had this team in the field who wasn't always involved because they were busy supporting, and bring the communication bridge between the two. And oftentimes it was communicating to the corporate folks about the needs in the field as much as it was the other way around. So that was a challenge, as I would imagine it is in every organization, but a challenge and something that was a development area for me that I loved. I loved that area for sure. And the other thing I would say is that I love to coach. So I would find opportunities to do that. That was very fulfilling to me. That helped me build Come Alive. And that's why I love now at Arete doing that full time, leadership coaching, as well as team training and effectiveness coaching. I mean, you put me in front of a group, I'm just like on cloud nine. I love it. I do. It's the truth. So although my role was not directly doing that, I would find opportunities to do that. Yeah.
I like what you said, because I think what it speaks to is leaders need to identify, right, be able to articulate their own needs, their needs being met through the work they do in some way, shape, or form, or whether that is as an advocate, like you described, being an advocate for the corporate office and also for this mobile team, and perhaps also knowing your own human needs, right, to connect and relate and to be able to express your opinion, or that your opinion matters in the grand scheme of things. I think the opportunity for us to have more clarity as leaders about that makes it, the likelihood that your needs will be met is higher when we're able to articulate those, right? And then you also seeking opportunities to give your gift and your talent, which I think is huge. And so leadership is not just this experience of being in a role and now being responsible for a group of people and holding them accountable. It sounds like you also took to heart being accountable to yourself and your own needs, and being able to articulate to whomever you needed to have them fulfilled. That's really super helpful. Couple things as we wrap up. So now you've been in transition the last couple years into coming into your own, and I'll have to say you were instrumental in my desire to be a coach as well, because I remember a conversation where I was just like, coaching, what? This takes so much time and one-on-one. And I don't know how you saw the future, but I know for you, being future-minded is really important as a leader. So can you speak to how you used your futuristic superpower and how you're applying that today?
Wow, that's a big question. So futuristic superpower, I love it.
Yeah.
So I remember years ago taking the Strength Finder, right, assessment, and my number one item that came up, and I've taken it twice since, and it still comes up number one, is that individualism. And so when I think about, for those who may not know, when I think about that particular trait, is as it's described, is really about matching people's skills and talents with specific jobs, and being able to see that potential in people and events as well, and planning for that. Futuristic was number two, planning for the future. Yeah, absolutely, and looking forward. And so I think about that, and maybe that's why I started with the selection process today, when we talked about putting a virtual team together and the importance of that. And oftentimes people are just filling a position, and yet we need to think longer term, right, with that. So I think that's important. And I think really my decision to be a co-founder at Arete Coaching Group with Doug Patrick is this idea about the future and what that holds, and being able to impact more lives, more people through what not only gives me energy, but I humbly say what I think I do best. And that is really leadership coaching and team training and coaching. There were elements of that with my previous job, but I also had a lot of reporting to do and a lot of meetings. And so now I choose to be my best, if you will, right? And do more of what I love and do it more full time. Would I love to be even busier and impact even more lives? Absolutely. And that's what the future is. That's how I see the future. Hopefully that answered the question for you.
It does. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so if people want to get a hold of you and Doug for Arete Coaching Services, where should they contact you guys?
Well, thank you for asking that question. So you can reach me at Tim. Here's my email, tim@Arete, and I'll spell it for you. It's a Greek word which means fulfilling one's purpose with excellence. And it's spelled ARETE. So Tim@AreteCoachingGroup.com. or you can visit our website at aratecoachinggroup.com. We have a ton of resources that you can download there and other information that would be helpful for you. So feel free to do that.
And I'll make sure to put both of those, your email, your website, on the show notes so people can connect to it directly. Tim, this has been a really phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much. And I think, I so appreciate, and I get emotional now too, who you allowed me to be while we worked together. The space, we joked about you holding space for us, but I think the space that you held for so many of us to bring and contribute our gifts in meaningful ways, and how much I appreciate having a leader who I've been able to grow with. And even to this day, it's been years now since we worked together, but still having that level of respect and being able to honor one another this way means a lot to me. And you've been, a great supporter of mine since day one. So I just want to acknowledge you for what you now not only brought to me and to the team that we worked on, but what you're now bringing to other organizations. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'm honored that you would ask me in to connect to Joy and to your group. And I love you, Valerie Hope. I respect you, and I'm so proud of you, and I look forward to an even greater future for you.
Thank you so much. I love you too.
Just don't forget us small people, okay?
Sure. We will not forget the small people. And I think just to wrap up, gosh, this is why I think these conversations are so important. These are the kind of relationships that one could have in business. This is it. These are the type of conversations and relationships and impact that one could have. And I feel like, what you and I bring to the world through our own vehicles in our own way is an ability for people to do that, be more conscious and more intentional about it, right? Where their needs, both emotional, financial, physical, mental needs, could be fulfilled through the work that they do and the people with whom they connect, both to serve and to build. So thank you so much, Tim, for being here. Continuing the trend, because there's so many people who've meant so much to me over the years. Next week, we have Patty Clapp, who was my former boss at the Dallas Chamber of Commerce many years ago, is going to be coming to Time to Come Alive to share a bit about her experience and also how she would help people, especially starting right out of college. She just had a track record for creating leaders, especially female leaders. And, she's very respected in the Dallas community. And so excited to have her to talk a little bit about what she did and what drove her to come alive to help others. So thank you all for joining today. Wonderful show. Tim, once again, thank you. And please share this conversation. This is a mindful conversation for you all to have with your teams and your supervisors, and find ways in which to tap into your own, connect to your own joy at work. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.